Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my friends. We are here with another video, and today we'll be talking about 10 early metal albums every metal fan needs to hear from start to finish. Heavy metal as a genre has become woefully misunderstood and underappreciated in recent years, as its dozens of subgenres have fragmented and evolved away from the intense yet accessible nature of its roots. What began as late 60s experiments with guitar distortion among blues rock bands has now become one of the most diverse genres around, and yet many modern metal acts have lost sight of those roots, leaving classical metal on the brink of being just a reference in 80s movies. The original waves of heavy metal, as shown in documentaries like Dio, Dreamers Never Die, were absolutely a product of their time, while modern music production has now heavily shifted in favor of singles and EPs over full albums. Classic metal has always been best when listened to cover, so find a proper stereo, plug in some over-the-ear headphones, and let the gods of rock transport you back to the golden age of heavy metal. We begin with number 10's In the Court of the Crimson King from 1969. While technically a progressive rock band, King Crimson were heavily influential to the DNA of heavy metal, and nowhere else is this more apparent than their semi-eponymous debut, In the Court of the Crimson King. All the prototypical elements of metal are here on this album. Intense rhythms, phenomenal guitar riffs, esoteric and mythological imagery, as they coalesce into something that could be described as a relentless assault on the senses. Out of the 5 songs on the album, 2 stand out as true primogenitors of heavy metal. The opening track, 21st Century Schizoid Man, plays with meter throughout its 7-minute, 24-second runtime until reaching a chaotic climax inspired by the big band sound of Duke Ellington's orchestra, and yet the half-century-old riffs are undeniably metal at their core. The same goes for The Court of the Crimson King itself, a 9.5-minute epic that defies description and clearly had a profound influence on Stephen King's entire body of work. At number 9, we have Paranoid from 1970. While Black Sabbath's first album is generally considered the first true heavy metal album ever released, it's the band's sophomore outing, released only 7 months later, that is a start-to-finish masterpiece. Some of Sabbath's most iconic songs, like Iron Man, War Pigs, come from this album, but there isn't a sleeper to be found, partially because Behind the Wall of Sleep was on Black Sabbath instead. Paranoid was also historically important because of its place in the controversy fueled by the moral majority movement in the 1980s, as they attempted to stamp out any music they deemed as satanic. Lyrics to Hand of Doom and War Pigs were held up as example of the forces corrupting the morality of young people, even though the songs are clearly written as a cautionary tale about the dangers of drug addiction and the Vietnam War. So, because of both its historical importance and its truly legendary licks, Paranoid remains one of the most essential albums of early metal. For me, the first 4 or 5 Sabbath albums, I came into Sabbath around the Dio era and really loved the Tony Martin era. It wasn't until I got older that I took a great appreciation for the Ozzy era, especially Sabotage, Volume 4, stuff like that. So yeah, Paranoid, brilliant, amazing, and they said it, important album. At number 8, we have Led Zeppelin 4 from 1971. Led Zeppelin's 4th studio album is technically untitled, as guitarist Jimmy Page decided in response to Led Zeppelin 3's mediocre reception to depart from the numbering convention the band had previously used. Instead, each member of the band chose or created a symbol to represent themselves, and those 4 symbols technically made up the record's title. As a result, while still commonly called Zeppelin 4 by the band members and fans to this day, the album is also known as Zoso, which is what Page's symbol appears to read as, 4 symbols, untitled, and even runes. Whatever the title, Led Zeppelin's 4th release remains one of their most cohesive and heaviest records. The opening moments of Black Dog begin with a tape of guitars being spun up to speed before suddenly cutting out, only for Robert Plant shrieking, "Hey, hey, mama," to slap you across the ears and get you to pay attention, and the album's pace never slows from there. Stairway to Heaven has become one of the most iconic songs of all time. The Battle of Evermore and Misty Mountain Hop both continue the trend begun with Led Zeppelin II's Ramble On, with lyrics referencing the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. And the album's closer, When the Levee Breaks, is a reworked version of a blues track from 1929 by Memphis Minnie and Kansas Joe McCoy, reincarnating the original into an intense, pounding 7-minute epic. I didn't know that. At number 7, we have Machine Head by Deep Purple from 1972. Freaking, hey, talk about smoke on the water all you want. Let go of how much you've ever heard it and listen to it as if you're trying to listen to it for the first time. It's mesmerizing. While Deep Purple, like so many early metal bands, began as a progressive rock outfit, by the time they began recording their 6th album, Machine Head, they had refined their sound through 4 years of intense live gigs and returned to the studio with the goal of recapturing their intense live sound on tape, using the Rolling Stones mobile studio, a truck loaded with recording equipment and owned by the Stones, although other bands, particularly Led Zeppelin, had begun using it as well. They headed to the Montreux Casino in Switzerland, which often rented itself out as a recording studio. Fate intervened in a bizarre way when the Montreux Casino caught fire the day before Deep Purple began recording. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention were performing there when one of their fans fired off a flare, sending the building up in flames. Deep Purple had been drinking at a bar nearby and saw the fire happen, which inspired them to write the song Smoke on the Water and put it on Machine Head, and the rest is history. The rest of the album is also phenomenal, with Highway Star and Space Trucking standing out and particularly heavy. We come up to Demons and Wizards from 1972 by the rock band Uriah Heep. Demons and Wizards was a British rock group's first release with bassist Gary Thane, and the chemistry among Uriah Heep's members is audible throughout the album, with a sound that critics described as sullen and solitary, but also the finest high-energy workout of the year. This album further helped crystallize the link between heavy metal and strangely fantastical lyrics. The album's lead single, The Wizard, was Uriah Heep's first music video and is a very Zeppelin-esque acoustic ballad about meeting a royal wizard. Second single, Easy Livin', I actually know that more through Wasp than I do this album. That's neither here nor there. Is one of the most widely covered Uriah Heep songs since its release and is a solid representation of the album as a whole. Keyboardist Ken Hensley described in Demons and Wizards liner notes as just a collection of our songs that we had a good time recording. And that joy is evident throughout the album. I'm going to have to really listen to that album. Though I've heard a song here or there, I can't say I've ever sat down and listened to one of their albums, but I will rectify that this weekend. Spectres from 1977 by Blue Oyster Cult. The psychedelic rock quintet's 5th album, Spectres, was certified gold within 2 months of its release at the end of 1977, riding the high of the previous year's Agents of Fortune, freaking awesome album, which catapulted the band into the public eye with the single Don't Fear the Reaper. Blue Oyster Cult put together a second smash album that started off with a literal bang in the opening track Godzilla, a single that has long since been platinum certified. Note, it took 42 years for Godzilla to be used in an actual Godzilla film, when System of a Down frontman Serge Tankian, aided by Deathclock's real-life frontmen Brendan Small and drummer Gene Hoglan, covered the song for the soundtrack of 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters. That's hilarious. The rest of Spectres is full of songs that embody the hard-partying vibes of heavy metal, from the biker bar anthem Golden Age of Leather, which opens with a rousing verse from the Newark's Boys chorus, and the self-aware Are You Ready to Rock, to the album's closer, the moody vampire jam Nosferatu. While Blue Oyster Cult is sometimes considered a gimmick band, in no small part thanks to their lampooning on Saturday Night Live, Spectres shows that behind the sense of humor lies a beating heart of pure metal. And of course, it's going to be on the list, Motorhead's 1981 live album No Sleep Till Hammersmith. Recording during the 1981's Short Sharp Pain in the Neck tour, Motorhead's first live album is a collection of 11 unhinged, raw, and sometimes primal renditions of tracks from their first 4 studio albums. The tour was so named after drummer Phil Taylor was dropped on his head as the band members were roughhousing after a gig, although it also describes the after effect of too much headbanging, which is a common element after listening to Motorhead. Vocalist bassist Lemmy Kilmister is considered one of the true gods of metal, and Motorhead played live right up until his death from cancer in December 2015. But in 1981, before decades of heavy metal debauchery took their toll, Kilmister was on top of his game, playing some of the most brain-melting bass riffs anyone had ever heard. No Sleep Till Hammersmith serves as an early best-of compilation for Motorhead and is the kind of non-stop assault on the senses that reminds listeners that heavy metal is something that can bludgeon just as easily as shred. Got to tell you, I am not a huge fan of Motorhead. I have listened to nearly every Motorhead album up through the late 90s. And Lemmy's got a voice to be appreciated, and they've got a sound that is acquired. And I appreciate what Motorhead did for the genre. However, that being stated, I am a huge fan of Lemmy Kilmister, the man. I have watched documentaries on him. I have watched hours of interviews with him. And much like Frank Zappa, I just love hearing him talk and hearing what he has to say and his perspective on the world. He is truly, truly missed by this individual who doesn't own one Motorhead album. Number 3, we have 1982's Borrowed Time by the amazing Diamond Head. Borrowed Time, tremendous album. While the hard-rocking quartet of Diamond Head had already released a full album on an independent label, Borrowed Time was their first of 2 releases on major label MCA, It and Canterbury. Can't go wrong. Diamond Head were never one of the more globally popular bands from the late 70s wave of British heavy metal, but they were incredibly influential on the bands that followed them, particularly American thrash metal bands like Metallica and Megadeth. Borrowed Time was Diamond Head's first and only album to chart, reaching number 24 in the UK, and was the source of several of the band's most enduring live hits, In the Heat of the Night, and Don't You Ever Leave Me, as well as more polished versions of Lightning to the Nations and Am I Evil, which had both appeared on their debut, Lightning to the Nations. Am I Evil is easily Diamond Head's most famous song. It was never released as a single, but in 1984, Metallica covered it for the B-side of their single, Creeping Death. And the rest is history, right? At number 2, we have Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast from 1982. The Number of the Beast is the album that catapulted Iron Maiden from just one of many bands in the new wave of British heavy metal to international stardom that still continues to this day. It was vocalist Bruce Dickinson's first release with the band, and his new vocal style helped make The Number of the Beast the first Iron Maiden album to top the UK album charts and hit the US Billboard Top 40. The first single, Run to the Hills, was also Maiden's first top 10 single in the UK. From the opening song, Invaders, to the bombastic outro of the closer, Hallowed Be Thy Name, The Number of the Beast is a truly flawless album. Its open use of satanic symbolism painted a target on Iron Maiden's back and led to the public burnings of the album, but that only resulted in more publicity, with sales hitting gold in only a year, with platinum certification following soon in 1986. Since then, The Number of the Beast has repeatedly proven itself to be one of the greatest metal albums of all time, having sold at least 20 million copies and counting. And when it comes to album burnings, Dave Mustaine had the best attitude about it. When asked about churches burning his albums, his answer was, you gotta buy them to burn them. A lot of kids were probably really pissed off. And at number 1, of course, the king of all kings, the voice of heavy metal, the magic wizard himself, Dio's Holy Diver from 1983. Ronnie James Dio was already one of the great vocalists of heavy metal by the time Holy Diver was released. It was the first album of Dio, the band, but Dio, the man, had been involved in heavy metal since 1975, when Deep Purple's founding guitarist Ritchie Blackmore started a new band, Rainbow, inviting Dio and his then bandmates from Elf to join the project. After leaving Rainbow in 1979, Dio replaced Ozzy Osbourne as the lead vocalist for Black Sabbath, recording 3 albums with the legendary band until he departed in 1982 over creative disagreements and started his own project. Holy Diver shows Dio's mastery of the genre, as well as his cultural roots with riffs that crunch like broken bones and lyrics that aim to skewer hypocrisy in the establishment, particularly organized religion. Although his work with Elf in the 1970s used fantastical elements, as Holy Diver is Dio after having passed through the crucible of both Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, and as a result, the entire album thrums with life and power, particularly in the title track and the album's second single, Rainbow in the Dark. He really did evolve over those years and became an incredible lyricist, songwriting, melody maker, and he is truly missed. What just a magic individual. He will never be repeated. So that was a list of the 10 early metal albums every metal fan needs to hear to start from start to finish. And I couldn't agree more. If you get into metal, whenever you get into metal, whether you're 15 years old, 30 years old, whenever you get into metal, there are certain albums you've got to hear. And when I was coming up, they were still, even though they were relatively new albums, it was like, oh, you got to hear Back in Black, you know? You have to hear Love at First Sting. You have to hear In Trance by Scorpions. You know, you got to hear Blizzard of Oz by Ozzy Osbourne. There's just so many good, tremendously talented artists out there who put out amazing albums that are as classic as the 10 that were mentioned in this list. But I'm going to tell you, if you love heavy metal and you wave the flag of heavy metal, we're friends, bar none. As long as you love metal, you and I are tight. Anyway, take care. Have a good one. See you in the next video.